I'd like to thank my parents for always being supportive and thank all the teachers and faculty at Silver Creek for helping me get to where I am today.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. E and Ms. Koizumi for making senior year fun. Shout out to my parents, Ms. King, Mr. Ho, and Mr. Wen for being super dedicated teachers, and shout out to the custodians for keeping our campus clean.
I'd like to give a shout out to my little brother Dustin, my coach Javad, who's been coaching the tennis team for the past 2 years, and also a shout out to the members of the tennis team.
I'd like to give a shout out to my family, my friends, and especially Mr. G for always being there for me and giving me water and being a friend.
I'd like to give a shout out to Miss Morrow for making me realize I want to pursue medicine.
I want to give a shout out to Miss Sweck for excelling my writing skills. I also like to give a shout out to Miss Lee because you're like a second mom to me. Shout out to Mrs. Seal because you dealt with me for 4 years. Shout out to Mr. Hallinan because you're wise. And shout out to Miss Loveday and Mr. Spino because you guys, not only are you guys teachers, but you guys are great friends.
I would like to give a shout out to my friend Michaela because she supported me a lot and she gave me advice and she's like my sister to me.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Gatal for bearing me for 2 years.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Morrow and Miss Williams because I really enjoyed having both of your classes this year and you guys have inspired me to go into the field of nursing.
I'd like to give a shout out to my parents for never pressuring me but just encouraging me to do my best.
I would like to give a shout out to my parents, to Miss Tomlin and Miss Loveday.
I'd like to give a shout out to both my parents for supporting me through this endeavor.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Avila for inspiring me to pursue a career in marine biology.
I would like to give a shout out to Mrs. Stalky and Mr. Ho for always supporting me and keeping me on track.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Kala and Ms. Nguyen for always believing and encouraging me.
I would like to give a shout out to my parents for helping me through the school process.
I would like to give a shout out to Elizabeth Cabrera and Ariane Buenrostro for being a motivation and keeping me going with high school.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Ho, Mr. Avila, Ms. Liang, and Mr. Cardo for showing me that there's more ways to learn than from just a textbook.
I would like to give a shout out to Ms. Gatal and Mr. Henniger for showing that hard work does pay off.
I'd like to give a shout out to my parents for supporting me and for what I do.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Rivas for being an amazing drama teacher and just for always influencing my love for theater and always supporting me and helping me find my self-worth as well as letting me be a part of a beautiful community of people.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Brooks and Mr. Avila for always pushing me to do my best and to my parents for never giving up on me.
I would like to give Ms. Rabago a shout out for always being there and supporting me and helping me with all of my college apps.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Brooks, Mr. Butler, and Mr. Murphy, who will be retiring this year.
I'd like to give a shout out to my mom and dad for helping me get on the path I am on now, and to Mr. Cervantes, Ms. Morrow, Ms. Williams, and Mr. Butler.
I would want to give a shout out to my family who raised me and loved me.
So I'd like to give a shout out to Elizabeth because she's been there for me, and not only myself, but a lot of Latino students, I feel like. And she's someone that I can really look up to. And whenever you need anything, she's always there for you. And I really appreciate what she does for our community. And she's a very hard worker, and I get very inspired by her. And also, I'd like to thank my family for supporting me.
I'd like to give a shout out to my mom and auntie for always being there when I need them.
I would like to give a shout out to all my friends and family for always supporting me.
I would like to give a shout out to my mom for always supporting me.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Avila for inspiring me to become a marine biologist.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Seal, Miss Brooks, Miss Barrett, my parents, my friends Anil Shanakia, Alina Lawn, and my dear friend Joey.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Barrett, Miss Stalky, and Mr. Mock for guiding me through my senior year.
I would like to give a major shout out to our current activities director, Mrs. Seal, and my club advisors, Mr. Ho, Ms. Koizumi, and Mr. Dyer, who have all supported me throughout my leadership endeavors.
I would like to give a shout out to Ms. Gutal and Mr. Nyasman for making the classroom setting feel like a home. And I also would like to thank my parents for supporting me.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Seal for always supporting me in my journey and Master Chief Havel for inspiring me to take on this military path.
I would like to give a shout out to all staff members because they made Silver Creek what it is today.
I'd like to give a shout out to Miss Wessels because she helped me throughout the school year and she's a pretty cool teacher and she helps us understand what life is about. And also my parents because whenever I made a mistake, they were there to help me bring me up.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Williams for teaching me valuable lessons and also for my parents and my friends for sticking me during all these years.
I would like to give a shout out to my parents and my best friend supporting me, and to Miss King for pushing me beyond my limits.
I'd like to shout out my friends and my family, specifically my parents who got me through high school, and then my teachers, Miss Weckesser, Miss Barrett, Miss Koizumi, and Mr. Taylor for making my 4 years at high school memorable.
I would like to shout out all my teachers for continually supporting me through all these years and for helping me grow to the person I am today.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Mock, Mr. Ho, Mr. Do, Mr. Ka, Mr. Chu, Mr. Vu, and all of my other teachers I've had over the past 4 years. I would also like to give a shout out to my family, especially my parents, for always being there for me.
I would like to give a shout out to my parents for always supporting me and my siblings, and all the teachers that I've had throughout these 4 years of high school.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Avila and Miss Stocky and the whole squad for keeping me motivated to turn up.
I would like to give a shout out to my friends and family for supporting me, and for my high school teachers the last 4 years supporting me throughout my high school career.
I want to give a shout out to Miss Yi for making AP Psych my favorite class throughout all of high school, and also to Miss Wessels for being as much a friend to me as she was a teacher.
I would like to give a shout out to Ms. Gatal for making calculus bearable.
I would like to give a shout out to Ms. Milner for being very motivational and inspirational.
I'd like to give a shout out to my coaches, Coach Lucier, in particular, Coach Darren, my brother, Coach Edgar. I'd also like to give a shout out to my favorite teachers, Miss Madrigal and Miss Wessels, for making school kind of pretty cool.
I'd like to give a shout out to my mom and dad and Mr. Head and Mrs. Brooks for being there when I need it.
Shout out to Mr. G.
I would like to give a shout out to my parents for supporting me in everything I do and for influencing me and making me the person I am today.
I would like to give a shout out to my mom for supporting me for all these 4 years, and I'd like to give a quick shout out to Mr. Rios for helping me last year and for the play. Thank you.
I would like to give a special shout out to my mom and dad for motivating me throughout these 4 years of high school.
I would like to give a special shout out to my parents for supporting me and motivating me through it all.
In general, I'd like to give a shout out to all my teachers because in one way or another I've learned something from you, but in particular I'd like to shout out Miss Wessels, Miss Cuevas, and Mr. Chan.
I want to give a shout out to my mom for supporting me all these years, and my old teacher, Miss Chang from Summit, who pushed me to do my best.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Seal, Miss Chapman, Mr. Chan, and Miss Koizumi.
I would like to give a shout out to my friends and family for believing in me, and I would also like to thank Ma'am Cohen, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Head for helping me along the way.
I'd like to give a shout out to everyone who helped me along the way, including my family, friends, and teachers. I would especially like to give a shout out to Ms. Gatal, Mr. Youngblood, and Mr. Wen.
I would like to give a shout out to my parents for helping me along the way, and I'd also like to give a shout out to these teachers, Miss Wessels, Mr. Curran, and Mr. Cervantes, because their class not only helped me learn a lot, but it was also fun.
I'd like to give a shout out to anyone I've spent any time with in high school, and especially Ms. Gatal, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Ho.
I'd like to give a shout out to all of my amazing teachers, especially Ms. Gatal, Mr. Chan, and Mr. Youngblood.
I'd like to give a shout out to Miss Gatal, who told me to always do good math, and Miss Wessels, because Miss Wessels, I want to be just like you when I grow up.
I would like to shout out Mrs. Seal and Mr. Espino for not only being great teachers and advisors, but also to being a role model and people that I can look up to.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Cargill, Miss Seal, and Mr. Espino for providing me with support throughout my 4 years of high school.
I would like to give a shout out to my family, Mrs. Seal, and Mr. Espino.
I would like to give a shout out to my parents and my coaches for helping me along the way and pushing me to reach my full potential.
I would like to give a shout out and a sincere thank you to all my friends and teachers. You have all played a very important part in shaping who I am today.
I would like to give a shout out to my mom and my sister who has always been supportive of my academic journey, and especially to my mom who always pushes me and believed in me throughout this time, especially during college applications. And a huge shout out to my sister because she always makes me laugh when I'm sad. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone in my life who has influenced me, especially my AP teachers, my family, and all of my friends who have been there for me, especially through college application season, and just been there for me in general.
I would like to give a shout out to everyone who believed in me this year and all throughout high school, such as my friends, my family, and of course all my teachers, especially AP teachers this year, dealing with my senioritis.
I would like to give a shout out to all my teachers these previous years, especially Miss Seal.
I'd like to give a shout out to my friends and family for being really understanding about which college I'm attending.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Chan for being an incredibly passionate teacher and making me really love history, to Miss Wessels for showing me that you really can do whatever you set your mind to my mom for being incredibly supportive, and to my little sister for always making me laugh.
I would like to give a shout out to my dogs for always keeping me happy these past 4 years.
I'd like to thank all my friends out there for all the 4 years, and then the new friends I made last year. Tiffany, yes.
I would like to give a shout out to myself because I did all the work.
I would like to give a shout out to my family, friends, teachers, and my recruiter to help me become the better person I am today.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Aguelo for being an amazing advisor for Filipino Student Union.
I would like to give a shout out to my mom.
I'd like to shout out Miss Wessels, Miss Yee, Mr. Youngblood, and all my friends, Anil, Christian, Alina, Lon, for making me the person I am today.
Shout out to Miss Wack and Miss Nguyen for helping me throughout my years of high school.
I would like to give a shout out to my 2 older sisters, Tiffany and Brittany, for always inspiring and motivating me.
I'd like to thank my parents and best friends for always supporting me, and then some of my favorite teachers, Miss Wessels, Mr. Chan, and Mr. Henniger, for always encouraging me to do my best.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mrs. Seal for being an amazing activities director and always being there for us. I would also like to give a shout out to my 2 tennis coaches, Coach Do and Coach Aryan, for supporting our team, and some of my favorite teachers like Mr. Chan. And I would also like to give a shout out to my parents and my best friends.
I would like to give a shout out to my 2 Key Club advisors, Mr. Ho and Ms. Koizumi, for always supporting me in all of my academic endeavors.
I would like to give a shout out to my family and my friends and some of my favorite teachers on campus like Mrs. Seal, Mr. Chan, Mr. Lucier, and Mr. Henninger.
I would like to give a shout out to my family, my friends, and then Coach OJ for always supporting me and making high school super fun.
I would like to give a shout out to my sister, Miss Nguyen, Miss Frank, and also Mr. G, and lastly Commander Mashi for being great role models, and without them I probably wouldn't be going to college.
I would like to give shout outs to my family and my friends for always supporting me.
I would like to give a shout out to Coach Lucier, Coach Sandoval, Mr. Nguyen, and Ms. Brooks, and also my moms.
I would like to shout out Mr. Niasmin and Ms. Catal for always promoting me to work hard, and Mr. Seal for being so cool.
I'd like to give a shout out to Vincent Nguyen for bringing the Laptop Anime Club, Ella Cabral, Ms. Catal, and Loktang.
I would like to give a shout out to my mom and my younger brother for being the biggest supporters in my life.
I'd like to give a shout out to Miss Nguyen. You're an amazing teacher. Thank you for everything.
Shout out to my family and friends that have given me support and pain throughout the 4 years.
I'd like to give a shout out to Miss Wessels, Mr. Henninger, Mr. Seal, and Miss Nguyen for being the greatest teachers I've ever had.
I would like to give a shout out to my family who has loved me unconditionally and my friends who have kept me sane for the last 4 years.
I'd like to shout out Mr. Aguelo as well as my friends and family for the continuous support in those last 4 years.
I would like to shout out Mr. Niasmin and Ms. Foss for inspiring me through high school.
I'd like to shout out my friends and family that supported me throughout the years, as well as my English teachers that helped me have an interest in English.
I would like to shout out to Ms. Mejia for making this year less miserable.
I would like to give a shout out to my ASB officers, my class officers, Miss Seal, and most importantly, my mom.
I would like to give a shout out to my family, friends, teachers, counselors, myself, and including everyone else that have been supporting me throughout my entire life.
I want to give a shout out to Mr. Dyer, Miss Lugo, and Miss Check.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Stalky, Miss Scapitoni, Miss Martinez Campos, and the whole Performing Arts Department, and Mr. Youngblood.
I'd like to give a shout out to Nick Sensei, Miss Lugo, and Mr. Chan.
I want to give a shout out to Mr. Chu, Mr. Vu, Mr. Ho, Mr. Ka, and Daniel for being great badminton coaches.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Niasmin, Mr. Aguelo, Miss Nuri, and Nick Sensei.
I want to give a shout out to Mr. Niasmin, my math teacher last year, and Mr. Wen, my piano teachers, and Miss Nguyen.
I would like to give a shout out to my family and friends for always supporting me. Thank you.
I want to give a shout out to Mr. Chan, Miss Yee, and Miss Catal.
I would like to give a shout out to Miss Wessels, Miss Garcia, Miss Brooks, and Miss Fuentes.
I want to give a shout out to my parents for always pushing me to do my best and getting to me where I am today. Thank you.
I would like to give a shout out to my badminton coaches, Mr. Vu, Mr. Chu, Mr. Ho, Mr. Ka, and most importantly, Mr. Mak, who has helped shape me into the person I am today. Thank you.
I appreciate you.
I want to give a shout out to my parents, to Miss Check for always giving out free stuff, and to Miss Cabrera and Miss Rabago for always helping me for the past 4 years.
I would like to give a shout out to Mr. Murphy. I wish you a happy retirement.
I'm gonna give a shout out to Mr. Nasman.
I want to give a shout out to Mr. A and Miss Madrigal.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Henniger, Miss Yee, Miss Tran, and Miss Madrigal.
I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Kaw, Miss Cargill, Mr. Mock, and Miss Cavalier.
I want to give a shout out to Miss Madrigal, Miss Yee, and Mr. Cervantes.
I want to give a shout out to my parents and to my family for always giving me their love and support, and to Miss Rabago and all my teachers for helping me through my high school years.
I'd like to give a shout out to my friends, family, Mr. Mock, Mrs. Bear, and Miss Nure.